Welcome to the Life After Sugar podcast, the podcast that's not just about sugar, but about your relationship with it and also with food and especially with yourself. So if you want to discover your life after sugar and hear inspiring stories from all kinds of people who also cut out sugar in their way, at their pace, for their own reasons, this is the podcast for you. Because when you take away the sugar, you can finally discover the real sweetness in your life. I'm your host, Netta Gorman. Today I'm joined by Donna Schwenk, who has a podcast called Cultured Food Life, wonderful podcast about fermenting foods and drinks. And Donna and I are going to be talking about the power of fermented or cultured foods and drinks for your gut health, but also for your general health. They really are magic. And this week's episode is brought to you by the After Sugar Club, which is where you'll get the step-by-step guidance you need from me to help you let go of sugar and the emotional hold it has on you so that you can get to a place of freedom where you don't even need, want, or miss it anymore, so that you can break free from sugar for good and make your intermittent fasting lifestyle easy and natural. That's aftersugarclub.com and click on the green button, join the club. And if you're an intermittent faster, then I have 5 tips for you to help you get rid of cravings that may be getting in the way of you living your easy and natural intermittent fasting lifestyle. Go to aftersugarclub.com and download my 5 tips there. And if this is your first time here, welcome. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so that it appears magically in your podcast player every Sunday. And if you've listened to several episodes before and you haven't yet left a review, could I ask you to scroll down, please, and rate the podcast and leave a lovely review to tell me how this podcast is helping you in your life after sugar. Has it inspired you to reduce sugar? Has it made you think about sugar a little bit differently? Let me know. I love reading your reviews. Thank you. All right, here's my chat with Donna. And Donna, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about what your life was like before you discovered fermented foods and drinks?
Well, before I discovered it was kind of a little bit of a story, if you want to hear. I tell this a lot. I actually have a little video on this on one of my podcasts, but it was 2001 or 2000. I can't remember what it was. I was 40 at the time, and I found myself pregnant with my 3rd child. And I was really surprised by that, actually. And I had to have her early because my body started to shut down. My liver was shutting down. So they delivered her 8 weeks early. So here I was with this brand new, beautiful little 3-pound baby because she was born so prematurely. I was really scared because I wanted her to live a healthy life. And I knew I was in my 40s and I felt terrible. I had high blood pressure, diabetes, all kinds of problems. I'd had gestational diabetes when I had her. It went away after I had her, but then it came back a couple of months later. And I knew I was in trouble because it felt so bad that I wanted to live in order to really raise her and be healthy. And I started looking for answers. And there was a lot of things like diabetes in my family. Type 1 actually was more prevalent in my family which is it's very different than type 2, which is what I had, where you need insulin. I had a sister and a niece, and it was a problem. I knew it, and I knew what it did to people. I knew the devastating consequences of not taking care of your blood sugar, what happened to you. So I was working on that, and I was in a health food store one day, and I was looking for answers, and I found 2 books, and I pulled them off the shelf, and I sat down to read them. And one of the books, it was about ecology by Donna Gates, fell open to a page, and it talked about this drink called kefir. And I'd never heard of it. I didn't know what it was. Thought it was interesting. And then I opened another book, and it was Nourishing Traditions by Sally Fallon.
Yes.
And it too opened to a page on kefir, and it startled me. I was just like, what is this? Because I had never seen it. And right at that moment, a store employee who had been walking by came and stood in front of me and said, you know what? That's one of the most important books you will ever read. You should really pay attention. And then he kind of walked away, and I was like startled by all of this. So I bought both of those books, and I went and found this drink called kefir because I thought maybe it's trying to get my attention. I went home, I started making it. I started giving a teaspoon. My daughter was like 10 months old at the time. I started giving her like a teaspoon every time she ate. And in about 3 weeks, my husband walked into the living room holding her and said, Donna, Holly's gained 6 pounds, which is a lot for a preemie. And she had this color in her face. She'd been sleeping through the night. She wasn't spitting up anymore. All of her problems had gone away in this time that I had given it to her. And then it was like maybe like a week later, I was standing in the kitchen and I was doing dishes and I was looking out the window, and suddenly I found myself in the front yard and I was filling up all my bird feeders. Now, that doesn't sound like a big deal to you, but weeks before, those birds could get their own food because I was too sick to care. And I remember standing in that yard, looking around, and the grass was greener, the birds were singing, and I felt a wellness that came over me that I had never known. I had never felt like that. It was my blood pressure had normalized, my blood sugars had gone into the normal range, and I didn't know what had happened to me. And that started me on a journey. And the only thing I changed was I was drinking kefir. So I started researching it. I started trying to understand what had happened to me. And slowly, little by little, I told my friends, and I saw them get better, and I saw their kids get better, and I saw all of these problems that people were having going away. And that started me on a world of understanding microbes and the trillion that live inside of you.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand it. I didn't know it. I didn't know all the things they did. And we still have just got the tip of the iceberg trying to understand it. But you and I are 100 trillion bacteria, which is 10 times the cells in the body. It's everywhere. It helps you digest your food. It lowers inflammatory markers in the body. It works like enzymes on the gut that work like ACE inhibitor drugs. 1 out of 3 people for blood pressure. You couldn't even breathe without bacteria. That they do so many things. And I didn't know that. But when something makes you well, when you've been really sick, and I was living on the couch, just barely getting through the day, just taking care of my daughter, to this wellness where I wanted to write, I wanted to tell all my friends. And then that turned into writing books and websites and all this thing, because when something makes you well, you pay attention. Yes. I never wanted to go back to that life. I couldn't believe what was happening to me. And when you feel good, it opens up your heart in a way where all you want to do is help other people feel that way too. Because I saw everybody struggling. And I felt like I had, and people thought I was crazy. And fermenting food in your counters is just unheard of in this culture. Do you know what I'm saying? People think that's nuts. But it had made me well, and nobody was going to convince me otherwise, because my own life experience taught me lessons that no book could teach me, no person could teach me. I had witnessed and lived it. And when you love something, and I loved these microbes that were making me well, and I was living it, and I was doing it every day, the people who are looking for that will find you. And that's what happened to me. And it wasn't marketing. It was just pure love and joy and a desire to help others find what I had found and to create wellness. Because in this day and age, sickness is contagious. I mean, it's very contagious, the stuff we're going through. But wellness is contagious too. Because when you're well, you can't stop the feeling that you get. You want to share it. I always said I couldn't stop the joy that I felt because I was so sick. I felt terrible every day. And I would walk around my house going, I was not meant to live this way. There's got to be an answer for me. This isn't normal. This isn't the way I'm supposed to live my life. Now, 21 years later, I have that 20-year-old daughter. It's just extraordinary what's happened to her, because she lived a life that was very different than my other 2 children, who were much older. She lived a life with microbes and fermentation, and she's never had an antibiotic her whole life. She's had wellness. It has changed her dramatically, but it has taught her lessons all along the way that have been extraordinary. And that's what I'm about, is to teach you that the secrets lay inside of you to wellness. Beautiful. And to microbes and to cravings and to everything. and we just don't know it.
Yeah, we don't know. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful story. And all the more so for being, your own discovery. It's not like you did a whole bunch of research and then you said, all right, I'll give it a go. It sort of fell upon you,
Yeah,
and I
it to
think,
me.
yeah, I think
But it was
really.
an answer to prayer that it was a cry for help. You know what I
Mm,
mean? These sicknesses that we get, when we have things like high blood pressure and diabetes, this is our body crying out saying something's wrong. And I don't want to just band-aid it. I want to find out why it's there and what happened and what I can do to help my body, because sickness is not the enemy. It's just the warning. It's the warning siren. And that taught me everything. It changed my whole life.
amazing.
And but wellness does that. When you feel good, you want to do good. It
Yes,
just spills out of you.
absolutely. Absolutely. And it's like in the Western world, we think, well, if you're sick, first of all, sickness is a bit normalized. It's sort of, we're told, well, it's normal to get sicker as you get older, for example, um, I think. And then it's also like, well, the response to sickness seems to be, well, get medication. I mean, get treatment, get a surgery. I don't know if any doctor I've ever met has actually said to me, did you try kefir?
Well, they only get 2 weeks of nutrition in medical school. That's a lot of it, which is very sad because the body is made up of the foods that we eat. It's just simple when you think about it. And so if you're eating the wrong foods, it's like putting a goldfish in a bowl with water and it gets dirty and dirty and dirtier and dirtier, and then the fish dies or can't live. Clean that water and the fish is fine again.
Yes.
Do you know what I'm saying? It's the same with us. We don't know what's going on internally, so we get these symptoms and these things happen to us that are sickness and disease, but it's not the norm. Our body is designed to keep us well, but we haven't been designed to treat that with respect and to understand what's happening, because we get these cravings and we get these addictions to foods and unhealthy things because we get tired, we're overworked, so we reach for things that aren't good for us, and it's habits we've created. It's everybody around you is doing it, and so you become like them. And I guarantee you, if you lived in a with people who ate well all the time and were healthy and you didn't, you would be like them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You
Yes,
wouldn't go to
totally.
McDonald's. You know what I'm saying? You would eat healthy food because they were doing it. And what's happened is it's shifted to where people want convenience because they're tired, they're overworked. But I'm telling you, these foods are convenient. There's foods that are convenient that are healthy. We've just created a habit as something you don't know you're doing and you keep doing it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
it takes a little bit of undoing, but eventually it can be changed. And then you
Yes.
love the foods that keep you well.
And that change in habit is probably the biggest effort that you'll have to make, because actually making these fermented foods and drinks that you and I make, I mean, I don't know, it takes me a total of 10 seconds a day.
Yeah, I make a kefir smoothie every morning. And if your listeners don't know what kefir is a fermented drink. It's similar to yogurt, but has 50 probiotics in it, whereas yogurt usually only has 3 to 7. And I just throw frozen fruit into it, with it, and blend it up. And I've done this for 20 years. I make all different kinds of things. But here's the deal. When you eat these foods, it creates in you this synergistic effect, because the microbes break down the food, making them more digestible, because you're not really what you eat, you're what you can digest. And if you're missing the enzymes and the bacteria that you need to digest your food, you're not going to get the nutrients from it. So these foods do that. They break down the food, so it makes it more digestible. They just did a study in Harvard research, and they said that they took people who ate fermented foods and who ate all the foods that I recommend. And you don't need a ton of them, you just need a little bit. And then the other group, the control group, was fiber people. The people that had the fermented foods had 19 anti-inflammatory markers happen instantly from the first meal. The fiber group did not. The fiber, and I think fiber is super important, but what they found was when they tested their stools, they didn't have the proper bacteria to break down the carbohydrates and create the necessary compounds you need to be healthy. And they didn't give them the gut bacteria because they didn't have it. Fermented foods gave them the gut bacteria, And then of course you always need fiber too, because that is food for your microbes. And what happens is it changes your cravings, because then your microbes make more of the things you are eating. And that goes in the opposite too. So if you're eating a lot of sugar, you're going to have sugar loving microbes. And that creates effects in the brain, that creates dopamine that makes you crave it. It changes everything. And it all depends on, you're the captain of your ship. So what you put in your mouth determines what your body's going to create for you.
Absolutely.
And it creates wellness or illness depending on what you eat.
Why do you think that fermented foods are so little known in our society? Well, Western society, let's say.
Well, let me explain to you this little story. 100 years ago, okay, I think it was 1927? I think it was 1927, they developed the refrigerator and Freon and all that stuff. Prior to that, everybody fermented their foods to keep them safe. Because what happens when you ferment a food, you flood it with good bacteria so that none of the pathogens can come in. It preserves the food like mightily. If you make a jar of cultured vegetables, it can last in your fridge for 9 months because the good bacteria keeps out all the pathogens, preserves the food. So people preserved, their water wasn't safe, so they made fermented drinks all the time, which, because the water, that changed the water a lot. One of the cool things about fermentation is it removes chemicals and pesticides, but back then it also removed harmful bacteria because the good bacteria would dominate. They fermented their meats, they put them in the ground and fermented them, which I thought was crazy, but that's what they did. They fermented everything. So when the refrigerator came along, Frigidaire decided that it was going to say raw foods are better, fresh foods are better than fermentation. It kind of demonized them, and to promote the refrigerator. And they did a very good job. And 100 years later, we barely have any fermented foods in our diet. Maybe yogurt once in a while for some people. But those microbes weren't just preserving the food, they were preserving us. And they were making our microbiome a rich diversity of different microbes we no longer have. And then couple that with antibiotics, which kills the good and the bad bacteria, and then the pesticides and the chemicals we use. Fermented foods just fell out of favor, just like they do with, because they decided to promote them in a negative view. But they do that with a lot of foods. I've lived long enough to see them. Okay, I remember when fat was bad and you were going to die and have a heart attack if you ate fat. Now that's gone because there's good fats. And then eggs were bad and now they're good for you. And then there was coconut oil and that was horrible for you and now it's good for you. Do you know what I'm saying? It's just, it's all about commerce too. You know what I mean? Who wants to sell a product, who wants to do something, and you just need a little word of mouth. And so 100 years later, fermentation is not the norm anymore when it was, just simply because of modernized techniques that aren't bad. They just fell out of favor.
Yeah, yes, yes, absolutely. And it's kind of seen, in my experience, it's people see me as a bit weird to have fermenting things on my countertop, you know, and just the idea of having things at room temperature. And, you know, most people think that's going to make you sick.
Right. Because they promoted that. And here's in the beginning, when I was doing it, people were very critical of me. And they thought I was unsafe. And I'm like, you can say all you want, but these foods made me well. And nobody's going to convince me otherwise. I knew what was happening too, as far as I understood fermentation. Fermentation is safer than raw foods. You literally cannot have E. coli in cultured vegetables, because in order to have botulism, and like for instance, botulism can't occur in E. coli either because there's too much good bacteria in there. And for a botulism to occur, you have to heat the food, then can it, and get the air out. And then the only one that survives the heat is botulism. Well, that never happens in fermentation. And it's really cool. I have some really good documentation from the US Agricultural Society that tested and said fermented foods are extremely safe because there's so much good bacteria in them. And there's no cases of foodborne illness from them because the good bacteria dominates. And that's what was happening years ago, but they just programmed us to believe that it wasn't good. For instance, if you have raw cabbage, it's 60 milligrams of vitamin C. If you ferment that same amount of cabbage, it's 700 milligrams of vitamin C.
Wow.
So it's not just probiotics it puts in it. It increases vitamins and nutrients and minerals that we eat that really help our immune system, our body, and we're not eating them anymore.
Yeah.
And people don't understand that because it's just kind of been a long time. But for people to really understand, there's a lot, the research is caught up with me though. A lot of things that I knew back then that nobody knew, and people thought I was crazy. And I decided I wasn't going to tell anybody what I was doing, and that didn't work out very well. But you know what I'm saying? Because it was so, they would be very, very critical of me. But then
Yeah, that must have
slowly
been tough.
they all started believing.
Yeah, it's tough to be the outlier, as well as being sort of a home fermenter. I mean, you and I, we know the science behind it. It's just that science actually hasn't caught up to, well, it's only just catching up to what sort of nature always has already done.
Well, it's interesting too because people want to take pills, like they want to take probiotic supplements. That's what they want to do because it's easy. I'm not against them, but I do think they're causing some problems because they open up parts of the body where they don't belong. So a lot of people can get things like small intestinal bacteria overgrowth or what SIBO because they're getting bacteria in places where it shouldn't be happening. And the overuse, the body has this wonderful mechanism for eating fermented foods because it kind of puts a halo around the food and it's protected from the stomach acids where most probiotic pills are killed. And it speaks to the parts of the body where it's needed, but it puts out these compounds that you can't get in a pill. Do you know what I'm saying? It's so amazing how it works. And because I took supplements too, and they didn't work. And they're expensive.
Yeah, yeah.
But just one cup of kefir or a half a tablespoon of cultured vegetables or just even a fourth of a cup of kefir would flood my body with billions of microbes.
Yeah,
And that
and
wasn't
it's
happening
amazing.
with the others.
Yeah,
And it's just how our body's designed. It likes the food. It likes getting things in the form of food. That's what it's used to. That's how it works. And it knows what to do with it. But you take pills and supplements and you don't get the same effect because most of them are killed in the stomach acids, which is what the body's designed to do. It
yeah.
sits in the stomach acids and it's killed.
And my
Uh,
problem was that I was not making enough stomach acid. So my digestion, I just wasn't digesting my foods. I had the equivalent of 6, 9, 12 meals hanging about in my stomach. It was awful.
yeah.
And when I started with the fermented foods, at last things got moving. It was such a relief.
My daughter was 16 when I started these cultured foods, my oldest daughter, and she had a lot of IBS. And I didn't know what was wrong with her. And she'd had a lot of antibiotics, but she'd also done a very low carb diet. And she basically starved her microbiome of fiber, which, kind of made it, her gut lining became permeable. And so she got leaky gut. She had these problems. She started having massive food allergies to everything. And I didn't know what to do. And so I took her to the doctor and they said, well, it could be your gallbladder. Let's take out her gallbladder. And I'm like, that is surgery. We're not doing that because you don't even know if that's what's wrong. And I went home and I thought I can do better than this. I'm not going to do that because they don't even know if that's what's going on. So I gave her a fermented food every meal because it seemed that if she had a little bit of kefir for breakfast and a glass of kombucha for lunch with a little bit of like a spoonful of cultured vegetables and then kombucha for dinner or a fermented kefir soda or something, she could digest all her food.
Amazing.
And the amazing thing was her stomach stopped hurting because she would hurt every time she ate. Within a year, all of her food allergies had gone away. Well, and I didn't know why. Years later, I discovered that probably from overuse of antibiotics, because she had a lot of sinus infections, it kills off a very strong strain of bacteria called colostria, and it has like 100 species in it. It kills off bifido, it kills off all these different strains that you need. And by eating fermented foods, we put those strains back. And they have found that when they restore the strains that are missing, the food allergies go away. And that's exactly what happened to her and thousands of other people that I've helped.
It's amazing.
Because that's why the food allergies are occurring in such a huge amount of people, is that, especially in children, because they're getting so many antibiotics at a young age and missing those strains that help them digest their food.
I just want to take a quick break to introduce you to my partner for this podcast, Medicine with Heart, which is an international functional medicine clinic specializing in difficult chronic cases of hormone imbalance, Lyme disease, mold illness, and digestive dysfunction. You can sign up for a consultation with their team to see if they can help reverse your disease. Find out more about them at medicinewithheart.com. Exactly. And a lot of people say to me, well, look, this kefir, and I call it kefir, but I'm just being fancy.
No, that's fine.
They say, I can't drink it because I have an intolerance to dairy. And I'm like, have you ever actually tried real kefir, homemade? A lot of people who find they have what the intolerance is to is industrialized, non-fermented dairy. But when they try kefir, it just changes their whole intolerance to it.
Well, kefir is a very different food than regular dairy. But what happens when you make kefir, the lactose, which is what most people are allergic to, becomes 99.9% lactose free. So there's no, because the milk sugars are gone. The microbes eat the sugar out of the milk and they create their probiotics. So that tart taste you taste, that's the lactose gone. The tart, you get that in yogurt too. That means the microbes have eaten the sugars out of that milk, which most people are allergic to. I have gazillions of people who are lactose intolerant and do absolutely fine on kefir because it's 99.9% lactose free.
Absolutely. And the same goes for kombucha. And people say to me, hang on, you said you were sugar free, but you put sugar in your kombucha. And I joke that I've never had as many bags of sugar in my house since I've been sugar free, but I don't eat the sugar. I'm too lazy. I make my good bacteria eat it.
Well, for instance, when you look at, let me give you this little lesson. When you look at like yogurt or kefir in the grocery store, it'll say 12 carbohydrates because the manufacturers don't let them take off the fermentation. It's really only, in kefir, it's only like 1 gram, maybe. Okay. Yogurt, about 4 grams of carbohydrates. But they don't let them account for the fermentation because every batch is a little bit different. So they make them leave the carbohydrate count on there and the sugar count on there when it's actually almost zero. And it's the same with kombucha. If it's tasting tart, which it does, most of the sugar is gone. That's what you're tasting. And they make them put the sugars on there before the fermentation because they don't have a way to account for that.
Right. It's not an exact science.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So if it says 12, it's usually like 4 or 3. Do
you know
what I'm saying?
Depending, because a lot of industrial or commercial kombuchas have added sugars after fermentation. Otherwise, no one would drink them or buy them.
Well, what they do, and my favorite brand, and I don't get anything for saying this, I just like it, is GT Synergy. He's a purist, okay? Yeah. And he does not, he's very particular about what he does. And when you second ferment a kombucha, so when you make kombucha, most of the sugar's gone. When you second ferment it, you take the plain kombucha and you add about 2 ounces of fruit juice to it, and then you ferment it again. So those sugars are gone. At least in his are fermented, and that's why it tastes sour or tart or whatever. And he doesn't flash freeze they kind of flash freeze. Some of them flash pasteurize some of them so they won't bubble over on store shelves. He doesn't do that. He's got a method. He's got it going on. So I like his, and the juices that he uses are really good, but most of that juice is gone because that's why it tastes the way it does. So he can't even account for that because manufacturers won't let him. Yeah. They don't understand fermentation and they don't know how to adjust for that.
Right, exactly. Yes. And GT's was that's how I discovered kombucha. Right. And that's how I started my very first homemade kombucha because I didn't know anyone who could give me a SCOBY. So I made my own with some of the plain GTs, which is raw, as you say, hasn't been pasteurized. And there I was sort of taking pictures every half hour.
It's great, right?
I didn't realize it was going to take 3 weeks before I could see it.
Because you didn't have a SCOBY. It usually only takes like 6 to 8 days to make it, but it's because you didn't. But if you want to make your own SCOBY, it does take like 3 weeks. It's really fun if you can't get a SCOBY, but that's the beauty of it all, is watching the synergistic bacteria and yeast form this SCOBY that people don't know what the world it is. It's great.
It's so funny because, a lot of people turn their nose up at the SCOBY saying, that's like some kind of extraterrestrial weird, slimy. And I'm thinking, well, and we don't turn our nose up at like hot dogs, sausages, and Oreos. That goodness knows what's in them, but
Right.
we do turn our nose up at that. But I'm just sitting across from my kombucha that I let ferment now. Mine ferments for about 4 weeks. Otherwise, it tastes too sweet to my palate. That's changed,
Is your
And
house
then
cold?
pardon
Is,
me?
is your house on the cooler side?
No, I'm in Canada, and even though it's minus God knows what outside, it's still 22 degrees indoors. But the thing is, my tastes from not having consumed sweet foods for the last 7 years or so, I just find that anything under 4 weeks is too sweet. It's like anything under vinegar is not good for me. And then I put it in the hermetic bottles, those swing top bottles.
Yeah.
And I don't even add fruit juice. The second ferment is another week.
Well, it just keeps going. Well,
Yeah.
I wonder if your starter tea isn't very strong since you use GT. I think that's partly what you
Oh,
got
well,
going on.
that GT's was 6 years ago.
I know, but I wonder if your batch, if you wanted to speed it up, I would get another plain bottle of his and put it in there to make it stronger, because the stronger your starter tea, the faster it works.
But I'm in no rush.
Okay, well, if you're not in a rush, then I wouldn't worry about it.
I have different batches going at the same time, so I've always got some ready. But it's not that it's taking longer. It's that my taste, I don't like it when it's fermented and for fewer weeks.
Right, you like that stronger taste. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Yeah, we drink it every day. It's funny because there's a cool story about kombucha, and it was in Russia where they were having a lot of people dying from cancer and all these problems, and they sent some Russian scientists in there because there was one city right in the middle with the same water supply, the same they had access to everything the other things around them were getting, and everybody was getting cancer, but not in this one city. So they sent in these scientists trying to figure out into homes, trying to figure out what they were eating, what they were drinking, what they were doing. They couldn't find anything. And one day a scientist went into this lady's home. It's in a book too. I can't remember the name of the book, but went to this home and he found like a grandma. I think they call it a babushka or something. I think it was a Russian grandma. She went in there and she offered him this fermented tea. And she said, "Oh, we drink this at every meal." And he goes, "Well, what is this?" He took it home and tested in his lab and found all these components to it that helped protect the body from cancers and other things. And I guess they put a big study out on it. This was many, many years ago. This was, I don't even know how long ago it was, but I have the story on my website and the book it was in. But it's interesting because a lot of people, the story that GT had about kombucha was his mom, he was 19, and his mom had stage 4 breast cancer, and it was very aggressive. And he was a 19-year-old kid, and they went in to do the surgery to remove it, and it was just dormant. And the surgeons were like, "What is happening? Why is this dormant? It's there, but it's dormant." They said they sewed her back up and said, "Go home, keep doing whatever you're doing." What she was doing was, she lived in California. She worked at a cosmetic counter and would serve everybody who came to the cosmetic counter her homemade kombucha in champagne glasses to get them to come to her thing. And she'd been doing it for like 2 or 3 years. And he credited that with saving her life. The story's on his website. And he started promoting kombucha because it helped his mom's. He thought it saved his mom's life. And he had a little red wagon. He would take kombucha around to places in the beginning and do all this stuff. But that was his story.
Wow.
Him, like me, when something makes you well, you pay attention. And it talks about it on their website. But it was pretty amazing. She's alive and thriving to this day. And actually, she's beautiful. But anyway, it's interesting. And that was many years ago. But he did the same thing I did. This thing made him well. So it changed his whole life. And he started nobody knew about kombucha till he started selling it. And he was just a kid. So
Amazing.
That's kind of exciting.
Yeah, amazing. It's like, I think most people don't know that much about fermented foods or what fermentation does to the natural sugars, in vegetables when you're fermenting veggies, or to the added sugar in kombucha, or to the lactose in kefir that I say, or kefir, or yogurt. And can you just give us a quick tour around what happens to the natural or the added sugars in these fermented foods?
Well, it what it does is it needs a food source. Microbes they like fiber, they eat the sugars out of the food to create, their ability to thrive and grow. So they use it as a food source. And so then you don't get the sugar because you get probiotics instead. That's the deal. And they are very efficient at it. They do this throughout the whole body. One of the things that having a lot of good bacteria does, for instance, and this is something that I am seeing more and more and more. I'm getting emails constantly about people whose kidneys function is improving because it eats the toxic urea out of the urine and creates better kidney function because they uses it as a food. It eats it up.
Wow.
I am seeing this especially in people, and I've had probably 7 people tell me their kidney function has improved. One lady didn't have to go on dialysis. Two, one man and one lady. And I have this on a Lives Touch page on my website at culturedfoodlife.com. Just you'll see it says Lives Touch, and they send in their testimonies. Dogs who had kidney failure. My own dog had kidney problems for a little bit. I started giving him kefir, and the vet said that he needed to do something, put him on this medication. I never had to do it because I just gave him kefir and it cleared it right up.
Wow. Yeah.
And she didn't believe me, but then she tested him and was like, oh, okay. So something happened. So anyway, I'm seeing that. It also does it with cholesterol.
Really?
Helps yes, it lowers cholesterol by using a lot of the things that form the plaque to as a food source. Bacteria does everything.
I would imagine it lowers the inflammation, which is also part of cholesterol.
Yes, because inflammation is huge when it comes to plaque formation. They're finding that that's more important than anything you eat. And it has 19 anti-inflammatory markers when you consume it. It has the most probiotics of any food, kefir does. And it does so many things. I've dedicated a whole website to it, but I'm learning as I've gotten the last 20 years. There's stuff it does that I didn't know it could do. Well, now science is caught up, so I have research on all of it, which is exciting. It's everywhere. And so I have tons of research on all my it's not just anecdotal where people are just saying, oh, well, this made me well. In the beginning it was because there wasn't much out there.
Right, because science is just catching up, which I'm happy about because a lot of people will turn to the science. I mean, we didn't turn to science when we were told that fat is bad and eggs
no, we did not.
I'll just let that go without mentioning it. But I mean, it's, we do need the science to back it up these days, even though fermented foods and drinks have been doing good for people for thousands of years without all these scientific studies.
Well, it's new to people and they get afraid of it. And so I understand that. And I love science. I've never read so much research. And I mean, I've been doing it for 20 years and I love the scientific research. I have a little bit of that in my family. I have a scientist in my family. I enjoy it. There's something that I am naturally acclimated, but here's the deal. When you understand it, it helps you to apply it more. It helps you to understand it because this is the day of information where you can get information on anything, but you can also find a way to do it. And back in the day when I was doing it, I didn't have that. I didn't have access to that. But I do now, and I have been for many years. And when you understand the science behind it, it's not just me saying it. But honestly, the people, once they try it, you don't need me to convince you. Your own body will convince you of the benefits.
Agreed.
That's the beauty of this. I'm just the messenger.
Yes.
That's when things work, people pay attention.
Absolutely. And for me personally, it was that combination of stopping the sugar, the added refined sugar and starches for me, because I stopped flour as well, and bringing in the fermented foods at the same time or very soon after, that completely took away my cravings. I didn't really suffer from cravings when I first cut sugar, which is relatively rare, but I credit that to the fermented foods and drinks I was eating.
Yeah, and it's very, very good at that. That's one of the things that fermented foods are very good at, because I remember we were addicted to, this was years ago, to diet soda, which is not full of sugar, but it's full of the worst kind of sugar ever. And I couldn't get off of it because I think it was aspartame that I was taking. And what it does, it has amino acids in it and it has an incomplete one. So your body craves it, trying to complete it. And I couldn't get off of it kombucha got me off of it. Kombucha works with the liver to help detoxify you. And I saw these benefits happen, and all of a sudden I didn't crave it anymore. And I had been trying to get off of it for years, my whole family. This was 21 years ago. But anyway, it was the kombucha that helps me do that. It took away the cravings. And I found that with all fermented foods, sugar is a very addictive substance. It's as addictive as cocaine. It works on the brain, create more dopamine that makes you want more of it. And you just keep craving it. Well, when you have a lot of gut microbes that have been consuming it, that creates more of them, and then you crave it even more. So fermented foods has a way of just calming all that down. And you don't need a lot. It
No.
just, a spoonful of kraut can make a difference at lunch, or a pickle, a fermented pickle, ones that there are some in the store that are made with vinegars. Those aren't fermented, those aren't probiotic. But you would be so shocked at and it doesn't take but about 3 days and then you're good. It takes your body's always trying to assimilate what you eat, okay? It's trying to make nutrients and compounds from these foods you eat. So it tries to assimilate. So it makes you crave them so it can work on that. Once you get rid of it, the body's like, oh, okay, we don't have to do that anymore. And once you quit eating them, if you ever try to put it back in, you have a more severe reaction than you would than if you had just kept eating it, because the body's like, we don't want that anymore.
Yeah.
That's what I've noticed. That's what happened to me and my family. So it's really interesting.
Fantastic. And on your website and your podcast, you talk about all kinds of different aspects of fermentation, home fermentation. And I think do you sell starters and cultures as well?
Yeah, I do. And if you're like in Canada, like where you are, I have links to people who sell them there to help people find them in different parts of the country. Or I have share groups where people can find them, people who share because the cool thing is once you have a culture, it can last your lifetime if you take care of it.
Yes.
And it's a very sustainable thing to do because you can share them. You'll keep making new ones every week. So I have links to help people find them. And I also sell them, but you can, if you're in parts of the world where you can find them there too, because I worked hard to find all that. So to help people, so people will do it, because if people get well, they spread that to other people, And
it's fantastic. It's wonderful how it's such a sharing kind of community. Can you remind us of the name of your website, please?
It's just culturedfoodlife.com.
Okay.
Just like the podcast, it's the same name. And I have how to make everything free on my site. I teach you I don't care what fermentation you want to learn. I've got it up there. There's a little smiley pot on the menu bar that says start here. There's a drop-down menu, it has kefir, kombucha, cultured vegetables, water kefir sodas. It's got everything, and it's all free. I got videos, everything, because I want people to do it. And then I show you where to get stuff. You don't need a lot. If you're making kefir, you need a jar. You need milk. It can be non-dairy or regular dairy, either one. And I have instructions for all of that. And then you need a culture, and then you're good. And for kombucha, it's tea bags, sugar, and water. And culture, and you're good.
Time.
Yes, and a little bit of time. And each one of them, vegetables is just, vegetables, a jar, and a starter, and some salt. You got to need salt because it'll get mushy if you don't put salt in it, because it keeps it crunchy. But it's very simple to do. And do the one that you're most attracted to, because usually that's the one you need. Each one of them has different probiotics in it, and they do different things, which I love. So do what you're most attracted to.
Wonderful.
Probably what you need.
Yeah, and I would add, give it a try, because they're probably tastes that you're not used to. If only for the fact that they're not sweet. Most people are looking for that sweet taste. And sugar is the worst thing for your gut health. So it's like you can't use fermented foods to sort of compensate for a sugar-filled diet, because it's like you got to cut the sugar and add the fermented foods. And as you say, you don't need a ton of them. And that is really what makes the difference.
It does. It makes all the difference.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Oh, well, it's my pleasure. It was fun talking to you.
Thank you. Oh, what a great chat with Donna. Now, she really is an expert in fermented foods, also called cultured foods. And you can see that there is definitely a connection between eating less sugar and adding more fermented foods to your diet. because sugar is one of the worst things for your gut health, and fermented foods are wonderful for your gut health. And they're definitely more delicious and way cheaper than those probiotic capsules. Plus, they're real foods, and your body knows what to do with real foods way more than it does with pills. To learn more about fermented foods and the connection with sugar, head on over to my website aftersugarclub.com and click on What to Eat in the top menu. You'll find videos there about where added sugars are hiding, as well as how to find real whole foods that don't contain added sugars, and also a video about what's the deal with fermented foods. And if you click on the FAQs in the top menu, you'll also find lots of information about sugar, intermittent fasting, hunger, insulin, weight loss, and fermented foods. That's aftersugarclub.com and click on the orange button, Learn More. You can also grab my list of top 10 books about sugar, intermittent fasting, and gut health, because knowledge is power, and I don't want you to spend the hundreds of hours that I spent reading through dozens of books. So that's why I want to give you my list of top 10 books, and even if you only read one or two of them, it'll make a huge difference in how you see sugar, intermittent fasting, and gut health. And you can download that list at aftersugarclub.com and click on the orange Learn More button. And if you're an intermittent faster, then I have 5 tips for you to help get rid of cravings that may be getting in the way of the easy and natural intermittent fasting lifestyle that you're looking for. You'll find those at aftersugarclub.com. You can also find lots of free resources on the Life After Sugar YouTube channel, on the Life After Sugar Facebook page, and come and subscribe to my Instagram, which is at My Life After Sugar, where I post pictures of what I eat, what I do, so that you can see that it is totally possible to live an active, happy, and fun life, even if you don't eat sugar. And if you want to be more confident about what you choose to eat, including making your own fermented foods and drinks, and never have to wonder again, should I eat this? Does this contain sugar? What does that label mean? Or how can I get rid of my cravings? Then become a member of the After Sugar Club, where we take a deeper dive into your relationship with sugar, so that you get step-by-step guidance from me to let go of sugar so that it doesn't have this hold on you that stops you from really feeling free. Join us today in the After Sugar Club at aftersugarclub.com and click on the green button, Join the Club. Can't wait to see you there. And if you're enjoying this podcast, could I ask you please to scroll down and leave a lovely 5-star rating? And if you haven't already, leave a review to let me know how this podcast is inspiring you to reduce sugar your way and live your life after sugar. Thank you for listening. That's it for this week. Keep in touch and see you soon for another episode.